face of economic downturns such as the COVID crisis that we are living today, people often find appeal in ideologies that promote protectionism and deglobalization as a solution to our problems. And bigger than neighbor policies that do not take into account the effect of our actions on neighboring countries, but also countries that we cooperate with. And I firmly believe that if you want to outperform global competition, you need to be in that competition. And we need to build the strength that is needed to go on international markets and do that in an open environment. And that is possible if we implement a set of domestic policy reforms. And that goes from investing in research and development, improving the skills of our workforce and their health so that they can be more productive, and also, and most importantly, to have domestic competitive markets that would ensure enough innovation from these firms to improve the quality of their products and let them go on these international markets and be more competitive. The second point I want to raise is about the individual. So today we face a backlash with regards to globalization, and it's fueled by two factors, which are mainly economic factors and cultural factors. And among these economic factors, we find inequality. So economics is not just about efficiency, it's also about fairness and compensation. And we live in a second-best world, and we have the tools to achieve a better solution to decrease the divide between a globalized elite and the rest of the population that might suffer from globalization and trade. And maybe we can implement progressive taxation schemes, maybe on income or value-added taxes to reduce this divide. And the last point I want to raise is that we need to use the momentum given to us by the digital revolution to set new rules for a peaceful order. And we need to serve on this revolution us as a global new South to influence this policy debate. And we need to come together as a region, and by saying that I mean Africa, but also as a whole global new South to build a common capacity to be able to set these new rules.
From South Asia to Africa to Latin America, the pandemic is confronting developing countries with a public health emergency combined with an economic crisis, each exacerbating the other as the months wear on. Weak healthcare systems and social safety nets have come under immense scrutiny and pressure. All of this unfolding just as many of these governments are burdened by debt that limits even their ability to help those in need. In crises and economic downturns such as this, there is this tendency to reject economic interdependence and to turn inward and to turn to economic nationalism. But is this approach a viable solution to avoid another global economic crisis? I would say no, and the crisis itself has taught us a lot in this regard. First, this crisis has always taught us that we need governments to shift policy priorities to a broader set of metrics beyond just GDP growth to prevent such negative societal outcomes that these crises usually present. Most governments have reacted rapidly to build an economic life support system that is closely calibrated to their national economy, for example, but they also do it to also coordinate with the global financial and monetary system. I think we need to see more of these, and we need to see more of this with developing countries with the support of the multilateral system. Second, whether the balance of global economic power rests with the West or China or otherwise post-COVID, we know that now is the time to really double down on multilateral efforts and collaboration and coordination in real ways. Most notably, and for Africa, is an opportunity to double down on the Africa Free Trade Agreement and to really realize this ambitious project to enhance Africa's economic self-reliance and reduce its dependence on trade and aid from overseas. Third, I believe that amidst the crisis, there is a real opportunity for African leaders to respond to these realities by enacting policies and utilize this full range of approaches and policy toolbox that look toward and look outward to benefit citizens within. The short-term impact on the most vulnerable in our countries and the longer-term impact on inequality and sustainability and viability of our economies and our societies across the continent are banking on this.
Hi, my name is MAYECOR, and I'm a 2015 emerging leader from Senegal. So, how did we come to this? Well, I believe that in 2008, we truly let a good crisis go to waste. We just propped up the existing economic system and just sleepwalked into the next crisis. In fact, I believe that events such as the Brexit referendum, such as Donald Trump's election and all the anti-globalist movements that have been gaining traction all across the world, are a direct reflection of us not tackling the 2008 crisis properly. In fact, I think it was Henry Kissinger's whose words in his 2018 Financial Times interview that actually seems prescient with, in hindsight, when he argued that characters such as Donald Trump are characters that come around once in a while when we reach the end of an economic order, but we fail to admit it to ourselves. Well, I believe that 2020 is our day of reckoning. It is us admitting to ourselves that the world has changed and we need to change with it. I mean, we are facing the rare occurrence of double shocks to demand and supply, as well as the complete collapse of the global supply chain as countries have stopped trading with each other. There are also geopolitical issues. We have seen in the past few months the return of nation states with borders being raised in the Schengen area for the first time in decades. We have the US and China increasingly at loggerheads, blaming each other for their respective roles in the current crisis. And this is compounded by governance issues. We see democracies all across the world that are unable to, they were unable to prevent the crisis, and now they're unable to tackle it and to take sweeping and decisive actions to tackle this crisis. Therefore, I think all these questions will, once the crisis is over, will have to be answered and will have to be dealt with, and things will change. The question now is how do we deal with China? Do we reduce our dependence to it, to the country, or do we embrace China as a fully fledged actor in the global system? I personally believe that the latter option is the best. I mean, we have seen in the past few years China being very aggressive in building bridges with countries in Africa, for example, and the developing world in general. They have rekindled the Belt and Roads Initiative, which is a modern day Silk Road, and they have also I mean, it's been well documented that China's economy is also very intertwined with Western economies in Europe and in the US in particular. Therefore, it would be foolish from all of us or from the global community to ostracize China. Therefore, I believe that it's important to build on the global system. We have to obviously rebuild it today, especially in the global governance institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, and the UN have to take into account the current balance of power by giving more of a voice to countries like China, to countries like Indonesia, African countries like Nigeria and South Africa, who are increasingly important regional players. And I mean, the global community has, in a sense, has to realize that the world that prevailed in the 1970s is not the same as the one that we deal with in 2020. And I would just like to add to that the fact that maybe more cooperation is needed in certain areas such as, for example, healthcare, areas such as education, how do we deal with climate change. These are all issues that the world would need greater cooperation in, and therefore I believe that we need to move towards a more globalized world and a more cooperative world than we have witnessed in the past few years. And I think moving towards the Trumpian or a Boris Johnson type of America first or Britain first with economic nationalism at the forefront of everything, I think is counterproductive and will only lead to more pain in the world. So thank you very much, and stay safe, everyone.
The practicality of economic nationalism and the policies associated with it have been a topic of debate for close to 2 decades now, and have been throughout history following various crises. Most recently, following the global financial crisis of 2008, there was a resurgence in the rhetoric, political and academic, towards economic nationalism. We saw with the rise of certain nationalist politicians in the United States and Europe on the back of economic and social problems in their societies, align themselves towards policies around economic nationalism. This current crisis, the pandemic, will simply accelerate this resurgence, both on an intellectual front in terms of the academia, the debate around the viability of policies around economic nationalism, and indeed the political rhetoric. The challenge will come around the practical implementation of these. The inherent complexity and connectivity of the global economic system that actually was the reason why a healthcare crisis crippled the global economy, simply because of the connectivity of the world through travel and communication, points that it would be very difficult to unravel this inherent connectivity. And the complexity of the systems, the layers of the systems, from everything around trade agreements to supply chains, to the competitiveness of certain economies around the production of competitive goods, means that the practical implementation of policies towards economic nationalism are very difficult. And to reorient an economy towards self-sufficiency, autarky, is practically impossible. We will see a movement to diversify supply chains away from China. This presents an incredible opportunity to countries in Africa to reorient their value proposition and really push for the outcome of China, the outpour of industries located in China to be relocated in Africa. This is one method and strategic method of reorienting the global economic system. But beyond that, it is practically impossible to create self-sufficiency in the current system. The complexity, the connectivity means that it would require such a multifaceted and internationally cooperative environment. But the inherent combative nature of such policies means that they're often punitive, and the economic policies that are adopted are in the form of tariffs, and this results to trade wars. As we've seen with the most recent trade war between the United States and China, that creates more economic disruption and will exacerbate the situation as a whole.